We often think about history in terms of these big events, right? Grand narratives. But I always find the real power, it's in the personal stories.
Exactly. That's where it really comes alive.
Yeah, those individual journeys. That's how you get insights you just wouldn't find otherwise.
Yeah.
And, well, that's exactly what we're getting into today.
Precisely. We're looking at history through a very specific viewpoint today, a visit to the Canadian Museum of Immigration at Pier 21 in Halifax.
Right. One of you shared a really thoughtful blog post about your experience there, and that's kind of our main source for this deep dive.
Yeah, it's a great starting point.
So our mission here isn't just to, retell the visit. We want to unpack what it tells us about the museum, sure, but more about that whole immigration experience it captures so well.
Consider it your condensed guide, maybe, a way to understand this really vital piece of Canadian history, but through a personal lens.
Okay, so the blog post kicks off with a question that, honestly, I think many of us have when thinking about, say, an immigration museum. Is it going to be engaging?
Right. Will it hold my attention?
Exactly. And the reviewer admits they weren't totally sure at first, but they were quickly won over, found it absolutely worth the 3 hours spent there.
They praised the curation, how informative it was. It really strikes me how a well-designed museum can do that, bridge the gap between, historical fact and real human feeling.
Absolutely. And one of the first things that really grabbed the reviewer was this wall of ships.
Ah, yes. That's quite something.
It's this huge display listing all the ships that brought immigrants into Halifax Harbor. But here's where it got personal for the reviewer. Their family actually arrived on one of those ships.
Yeah.
The Empress of Australia.
Wow. See, that changes everything, doesn't it? That personal connection. Suddenly it's not just a list of names.
Not at all. It becomes this tangible link to, their history. And it also makes you grasp the sheer scale of movement behind Canada's story. Makes the abstract feel deeply personal.
Exactly.
So the Empress of Australia, that was the ship that brought their mom, brother, and them over from Great Britain to Montreal eventually. And they even have this treasured photo their dad took when they arrived. The reviewer calls it a poignant reminder of their family's journey and, quote, countless others who have made similar sacrifices.
That word sacrifices, it really stands out. It makes you think about what people actually gave up, doesn't it?
It really does. We talk a lot about the opportunities, and rightly so, they're huge. But we also have to acknowledge the loss, the hardship involved in leaving everything you know behind.
It takes immense courage. And that photo, that personal memento, it just illustrates that so powerfully, so intimately.
So the blog post then digs into the journey itself. The Atlantic crossing. It was the start of a new life, yes, but the reviewer points out it was often fraught with difficulties. Let's maybe start with the conditions on board. Comfort, or perhaps the lack of it for many.
Well, this is where history really matters, understanding the context. The reviewer mentions the class divisions on these ships, stark differences. First-class passengers, relatively comfortable, but most immigrants traveled steerage. And that meant, cramped spaces, often unsanitary, very little privacy, basic facilities for weeks.
It really highlights the inequality of the time. And the reviewer gives their own experience as a reference point. Their family traveled second class.
Okay, so a step up from steerage.
Yeah, not technically an immigration ship maybe, but they were immigrating. They had a private cabin, shared bathrooms. But even that comparison makes you realize how tough steerage must have been.
Absolutely.
And then the food in steerage. Basic staples, bread, potatoes, salted meats. The blog mentions quality and quantity could be, inconsistent. What kind of impact would that have?
Oh, it would be draining. Physically, psychologically. Poor food, crowded conditions. It weakens you, makes you more prone to illness. But it also chips away at morale.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You're already facing this huge uncertainty, a new life in a new place, and the journey itself is just another layer of hardship.
Then you add the weather. The reviewer reminds us the crossing could take weeks. And rough seas, storms, unpredictable weather were common. This wasn't some relaxing cruise.
No, definitely not. It could be terrifying. That constant uncertainty, being stuck on a relatively small ship tossed around by the ocean.
There were days, maybe weeks on end.
Yeah. The motion, the fear, the sheer discomfort, it must have been relentless. It really speaks to the resilience of the people who went through it.
And there's a personal story here, too. The reviewer's mother's trip from Southampton. Just 1 week. But the weather was so bad.
Oh.
Apparently, she and her 2 young kids were often the only ones who could even make it to the dining room. For a whole week.
Wow. That really paints a picture, doesn't it? It makes rough seas feel very, very real. You can almost feel the isolation, the struggle.
Beyond just being uncomfortable, the journey had serious health risks too. The blog points this out: poor ventilation, overcrowding in steerage, perfect conditions for illness to spread.
Measles, influenza, outbreaks were common, and medical care on board. Pretty limited, especially for steerage passengers.
So what does that tell us about maybe the priorities back then?
Well, it highlights a real disparity. Regulations existed, sure, but often the focus was just on moving large numbers of people. The health and well-being of those in the cheapest class, well, it often seemed secondary. Limited medical help meant even common sicknesses could become life-threatening. Just another layer of danger and anxiety.
And finally, the reviewer talks about the emotional side of it all, the mixed emotions, they call it. Leaving home, anxiety about Canada, the unknown future, but balanced with hope for something better.
It must have been such an emotional roller coaster, leaving everything familiar, family, culture, everything. That's profound.
Yeah.
Then the worry about what's next, finding work, building a life, huge pressure. But that hope, that belief in a fresh start, that must have been the engine driving them forward, right? The thing that kept them resilient.
Absolutely. Okay, let's shift focus a bit to the museum itself. Pier 21. The blog gives us some key facts. Opened in 2011, located in the actual former Immigration Processing Center.
Right, the one that operated from 1928 to 1971.
That connection to the physical place seems so powerful. Why is that specific location so impactful, do you think?
Oh, it's incredibly symbolic. Pier 21 was the gateway for so many people during that era. Putting the museum right there, in those same buildings, it creates this immediate, visceral link to the past.
You're literally walking where they walk.
Exactly. Where countless people took their first steps in Canada, carrying all those hopes and anxieties we just talked about, it adds this layer of authenticity, this emotional weight that you just couldn't get anywhere else.
The museum focuses on the stories of immigrants who came through Halifax, but the blog also notes it explores the broader history of immigration to Canada, how all these individual stories weave together to form the national story.
Right. Canada's history is a history of immigration, fundamentally. So the museum offers this vital space to explore all the different facets of that, the contributions from everywhere, how these journeys shaped, the culture, the society, the economy.
And importantly, it doesn't shy away from the difficult parts. The reviewer highlights how it explores the inequities and prejudices faced by various immigrant groups. Reminder that it wasn't always easy for newcomers.
And it's crucial that they address that. You can't understand the history properly without acknowledging the hardships, the discrimination that many faced.
It gives a more honest picture.
Exactly, a more nuanced portrayal. It lets us learn from the past, understand the ongoing challenges around, integration and inclusion.
But the reviewer also mentions the museum highlights Canada's progress too, how the country has more recently embraced its identity as a multicultural society. That balance seems key. Acknowledging the past struggles, but also the positive changes.
It provides perspective, doesn't it? Seeing both the challenges and the progress gives maybe a more hopeful narrative. It suggests that while the path to being truly inclusive is ongoing, real strides have been made.
So the blog mentions key features. First, the exhibits. Described as a variety of interactive exhibits, personal stories, artifacts, multimedia. Sounds like they've really focused on making it engaging.
Interactive elements are great for that. They make history more accessible, more memorable. You engage more senses. You participate actively. It helps create a deeper connection. And personal stories, multimedia, they bring things to life way beyond just static displays.
And the ship's wall comes up again, of course. Still impactful, connecting people to those sea journeys.
It's like a visual anchor, right? The sheer number of ships really drives home the scale of it all. And for people with that personal link, like the reviewer, it can be incredibly moving, a direct line to their family's past.
Another key feature mentioned is the focus on personal stories, hearing firsthand accounts. The reviewer says this humanizes the historical data, fosters deeper understanding. Why is foregrounding those voices so important?
Because stories connect emotionally in a way that statistics just can't. Hearing directly from someone who lived it, you develop more empathy, more understanding. They offer unique viewpoints, show the real human impact behind the historical facts.
The museum also runs educational programs, workshops for schools, community groups, focusing on diversity, inclusion, immigration's impact, that seems like important work.
Definitely. Educational outreach is vital for museums like this. It means they're actively helping to build a more informed, more inclusive society, especially for younger generations. Helps break down stereotypes, build understanding.
And finally, the post mentions special events, lectures, exhibitions celebrating multiculturalism and the ongoing contributions of immigrants. Sounds like it's a living, breathing place.
Yeah, a museum that stays connected to current issues, that celebrates the ongoing contributions of diverse communities, that ensures it stays relevant. It becomes a place for conversation, for learning, for celebrating Canada's identity as it continues to evolve.
So the blog post wraps up with this overall reflection. The visit wasn't just educational, but a profound reflection on the resilience of those who sought a better life in Canada.
A powerful takeaway.
And it ends with this really interesting question. Has this rich tapestry of stories and experiences contributed to Canada's reputation as a welcoming, multinational country? It definitely makes you pause and think.
It really does. The museum, by presenting these stories so carefully, exploring both the good and the bad, it absolutely shapes how we understand Canada's identity and maybe how the world sees it too. It makes you reflect on the collective weight of all those journeys.
So as we finish up this deep dive, we've sort of traveled through the Canadian Museum of Immigration at Pier 21 ourselves, guided by that personal reflection. We've touched on those first impressions, the power of that ship wall.
Harsh realities, often, of the journey across the Atlantic.
Right. And the museum's critical role in telling Canada's complex immigration story, the hardships, the progress towards multiculturalism.
And ultimately, how one museum visit, seen through one person's eyes, can offer these really deep insights into migration, into the hope and resilience involved, and how it all continues to shape Canada today.
So here's a final thought for you listening. Think about the journeys, big or small, that have shaped your life, or maybe the lives of people you know. How does understanding those stories, personal ones, historical ones, change how you see the world, maybe even your own place in it?
We definitely encourage you to explore more. Maybe dig into Canada's immigration history, research your own family roots if you can, or even just visit a local museum that touches on similar themes. You might be surprised what connections you find and what you learn.